It's that time of year again where the weather is getting nice and it's time to get out of the house for some family fun. Lilliput is the perfect place and is open for the season. Be the first to take on their newest escape room, The Bunker. It's intense, exciting, and totally unforgettable. Prefer spooky? Try the Haunted Mansion. When you're done escaping, hit the mini golf course, go-karts, and jump pads. Lilliput is perfect for parties and group events too. Visit lilliput.net for hours and start your spring adventures at Lilliput.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host, guest, random reptoid, or chupacabra may not necessarily reflect those of AM 950 Radio, its affiliates, or its sponsors. Now, it's time to step into the unknown. There are things people experience but never talk about. A shadow moving in the corner, flickering of the lights, a disembodied voice. We invite you to talk with us. Share your story, share your experience, because this isn't just your story, this is our story. This is GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun.
And this is GhostBox Radio on AM 950, where every night we talk about the paranormal, ufology, Bigfoot, and so much more. My name is Greg Bakun. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And I am really excited to get right to this. As a month or so ago, we had a guest on talking about near-death experiences, and I find this such a fascinating conversation that I wanted to get another perspective on it. I wanted to talk more about this because this is something that I felt like we didn't really get as much into as I think we could have, and I think we got an author and a guest tonight that I think is really going to give us a good insight and have a good conversation about this as well. And I have to say, I'm going to point this out before we really get into this. And as I mentioned on Friday's show, that when I was putting a show together a couple nights ago, I heard some humming next to me coming from, honestly, back over this direction. And I just was like, okay, whatever. Getting ready for today's show, she fell off. The doll behind me fell off the reel-to-reel player I have here. That's never happened before in the 2 years that I've been doing the show from the studio. So I don't know. Maybe Raggedy Ann behind me is excited to hear what Simon has to say tonight. And so really excited. Simon Bown is the host of two influential podcasts, a clinical hypnotherapist, and an author specializing in topics related to consciousness, reincarnation, and the afterlife. He has produced over 800 podcast episodes engaging with leading experts and scholars in the field of near-death experiences, reincarnation, and contact with intelligent extraterrestrials. His podcast, Alien UFO Podcast, and Our Paranormal Afterlife have collectively garnered over 6 million downloads, with Our Paranormal Afterlife reaching #1 on the UK Apple Podcast spirituality charts. Simon holds a diploma in clinical hypnotherapy and is certified in past life regression therapy. He has conducted hundreds of past life regression sessions specializing in guiding individuals through these therapeutic processes. His research is informed by personal experiences with paranormal phenomena, including psychic flashes, UFO sightings, and other unexplained occurrences. These experiences have contributed to his academic interest in the nature of consciousness and its potential existence beyond the physical body. In addition to his work in podcasting and hypnotherapy, Simon is an avid bass guitarist and science fiction writer. And today we will be talking with Simon about his book, Verified Near-Death Experiences. Simon, welcome to GhostBox Radio.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Let's see what happens. See if we can make the doll fall off again.
Well, I mean, maybe you being on reminded her about a near-death experience she had or something at one point. I find this stuff really fascinating, and what I think it was in your press release, you had talked about something that really stuck out to me was the term challenge science. And I want to start off by asking you that. I mean, I think for us in that are interested in the paranormal of any kind, and it's also like along the lines of near-death experiences, along the lines of UFOs and aliens. That's kind of, do you think that's a big part of it, is the understanding that we do need to challenge science to have a healthy belief in these areas?
Oh yeah, yeah, and I think scientists want to be challenged. A lot of them, some of them not so much. It would seem.
Yeah.
It seems to be that's how science moves forward. It's constantly being challenged and theories being attacked, I suppose, and torn apart to see if they can find something wrong with them. And if they find something wrong, they say, "Okay, that's great. Let's try and work out why it was wrong." And I think for me, if I was a scientist, I always find the weird stuff, the strange stuff interesting, the anomalies. And I sometimes feel like scientists ignore the anomalies in a way. I heard a phrase that was like, scientists will sweep them under the carpet till the furniture topples over. And for me, that anomalies is where the fun is. That's where we need to investigate.
And I know we're talking about near death experiences, and we will get to that. But I mean, I look up into the sky and I see, millions of lights up in the sky. They're known as stars, right? And for anyone in the scientific community to say that there is nobody else in the universe apart from us, and I don't really know if there's a ton that say that any longer. But I mean, there are still some that do. I just like I shake my head like that's to me that just seems absolutely impossible. That seems to be no different than back in the 1400s, believing that the sun revolved around the earth. There is just it just we shouldn't be necessarily commenting too much on things that we just don't know.
Yeah, it's a scientific kind of box, isn't it? They're in the box, and if they don't have this solid evidence, then they won't accept information. It's like you hear scientists on the radio, or you see them on YouTube, and they say, "Oh, there is no evidence that there's life off anywhere from Earth." And you think, hang on a second, you need to check out all this UFO information. There's definitely something happening there. And it's like this thing that say your physical brain is the place where consciousness comes from. And when the brain dies, consciousness stops. And you need to get into near-death experiences, or maybe children with past life memories, and
Yep.
find such great information. There's one guy in my book, this woman, she dies on the operating table, and all these people come in and do all sorts of things, and she's resuscitated. And once she's stabilized, she says to them, "Oh, I saw you do this and you did that." And the neurosurgeon stood next to the bed she was on, and she said he clenched his fists, and she even clenched his teeth. And he said, "I'm not going to stand here and listen to this." And he stormed out the room. I mean, that's really shutting it down. It's almost like, putting your fingers in your ears and saying, "I can't hear you."
And so that's what the book is about. Verified near death experiences, Simon Brown. I mean, is what else do we find in the book? Because obviously it's going to be a lot of people who've experienced it, and as you mentioned, these are people who told you the stories, right?
Yeah, most of them.
Yeah.
There's two or three in there that are famous cases that I
Sure.
really like, but just about everybody in the book was a guest on my podcast, so I could quiz them about everything that happened. And then when I was writing the book, I did further Zoom calls with them. And when the book was almost finished, I sent them all their chapter that they're featured in so they could check it for accuracy. So yeah, I've talked to everybody. They've checked what's in the book and said, yeah, that's what happened.
It's incredible. And, did you find any sort of like, I mean, and I'd asked this before to somebody else, and I mean, obviously, a lot of people think of when they think of like near death experiences, there might be like the go to the light, oh, you're not ready yet, that sort of thing. But are there any with the people that you talked with, were there's any sort of maybe commonalities that you thought were interesting or stood out at all amongst the stories that people told you?
Yeah, there's one where I think three of them in the book describe the same location.
Really?
and it's a huge white building in the afterlife, which was kind of like a heaven for people who want to study. It was this
Oh,
enormous building that was so big, and it was floor to ceiling shelves full of books and scrolls. And three people all described that same building, that they went there. But one of the commonalities that a lot of people have in near death experience is called the life review, and that can
mm,
be really impactful when you're taken through your entire life, every second of it. And it's weird because people say it's over in an instant, but they see every second of their life, and they see how they interacted with people. And if they were mean to someone, they feel that person's emotions. So they get to feel really bad when they've been bad to people, and it really makes you think, oh man, I got to stop doing this. I didn't
yeah.
realize I was having this impact on all these people. But also, they show you when you were really nice to people, and you feel how good people felt when you were kind to them. And that shows up a lot in near death experiences. Not everybody has it, but I think that's one of the things that really changes people when they have a near death experience.
That's beautiful, actually, isn't it? The idea that you have that. And I'm going to say, when I was a child, and just understanding what death was, I always had that feeling that you review your life. And that's quite a concept for like a 5-year-old, quite frankly, that you kind of review it again. And I would suspect then that also means that a near death experience, which might be a small number of minutes, that time doesn't translate to the person who's having the near death experience. That it could be, if you're going through life, I mean, it could be, you could feel like that you've been dead for quite some time.
Yeah. Yeah. They say things to me like, I can tell you everything that happened in the near death experience, all the different incidents in a story, like one after the other. But actually, when they experienced them, they all happened at the same time. And they might have been, say, dead for 2 minutes on an operating table, but they say their near death experience seemed to last 5 years.
Yeah.
And so much happens to them. And it's that idea that actually time doesn't exist in the afterlife. That's kind of why it's eternal. There is no time passing. It's just the now, always.
Do you get a lot of these people who've experienced it to wish that they didn't come back?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Some of them get told they have to come back. Some decide to come back.
Some decide.
They often say they have no fear of death, and when the time comes, they'll be quite happy to go. But at the same time, they're not desperate to die. I
I
think there's a couple of people who may have said they wish they hadn't come back, but usually that's not the case.
I've I've had one. I've only known. I probably know more, but the one that stands out to me is one of my sister's friends' parents, and they had a near death experience, and it was pretty much what you just said, where he after he came back, he just was like, I'm ready whenever. I do not fear this, and that's a pretty impactful, powerful thing to say, especially now that he has passed, and just wonder what that's like to come back then, and does it seem familiar to him now, or anything like that. I think that's very interesting stuff.
Yeah, but people have the near death experience. They say leaving their body is like taking off a really heavy overcoat and suddenly you're free. And the coming back is difficult. One lady described it as like jumping into a freezing cold pool of water. And there was a guy, he was brought back to his body with some kind of spiritual being, like a spirit guide or something. And he looked at his body and thought, how am I going to fit in there? Look at me. I'm enormous. There's no way I'm going to fit in that tiny little body.
Wow.
And they might look at it and say, oh man, look at the state of that body. I don't want to go back to that.
That's
But they're also given opportunities to decide how their healing will progress and even remove stuff from their life. I've talked to people who've had that opportunity. And one woman said to me they were goofing off. Her and a couple of spirit guides were playing with her body. Like, well, what would happen if we left the body doing this? What if we left this leg broken or this arm broken? And how would that turn out?
Wow.
It's like the more you learn about it, the more complicated it gets. I'm sure you know what that's like.
Well, right. So what about dreams afterward? You come back from the afterlife. Do you have any of these people who have had dreams about returning or follow-ups or anything like that?
They occasionally have really powerful dreams but it's like the dreams are so vivid and you're so inside them and you remember them every second of that dream. And it may be that the deceased loved ones or spirit guides want to communicate with you. And that's what the dream's about. I had a dream a few years ago. My mother-in-law died. And a few months after, I had a dream where she came to me. And I remember that dream right now. I can see all of it in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a dream a couple of nights ago, which was, kind of bizarre nonsense kind of dream. And I've pretty much forgotten all of it. I've got one image in my mind and I knew it was about something. So these sort of spiritual dreams can be very vivid and they feel a certain way and you remember them really clearly.
I love it. Why don't we go ahead and do this? Let's take our first break. When we come back, I want to continue our conversation about near-death experiences. There's a lot of questions to ask here, and we're going to talk more about Simon's book. This is really cool. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Greg Bakun here. I love historic tours of Minneapolis and seeing everything it has to offer. But if you know me, I like to include a little spooky in my tours, which is why I found the perfect combination. Minneapolis Trolley Tours does this amazing candlelight ghost tour that you have to check out. It's an extremely immersive experience. It's a trolley trip that starts out at a haunted mansion, traveling around Minneapolis locations exposing ghost stories that the public and business owners would rather left untold. Then a tour of the aforementioned haunted mansion where ghosts of past residents from the 1800s reside, plus a lot of surprises to discover. Next, experience Gertrude's After Hours. Did I mention Gertrude is the mansion's most famous ghost? Maybe she'll show up. And you finish up the tour at Gertrude's Lounge in the haunted basement of the mansion with refreshments and Q&A. The trolleys are climate controlled and the mansion is restored to perfection. Check out MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for more information. Have you ever met someone who not only can help you on a deep spiritual level, but also potentially change your life? Refined Divine is an extremely gifted psychic medium who travels the nation and lives right here in the Midwest. And she offers mediumship, mentorship, house and business parties, energy healing, palm readings, and so much more. Refined Divine has helped thousands, and she can help you.
Hi, this is Psychic Medium Deb. I cannot wait to hear from you. You can go to refineddivinepsychic.com.
Greg Bakun here. Like you, I love good, fresh, delicious food. So I want to tell you about this treasure in Roseville called Maverick's Real Roast Beef. Maverick's has the best roast beef sandwiches I've ever had. Made fresh every order. Add fries or onion rings dropped in the fryer when ordered, and you have a winning combination. Maverick's Real Roast Beef has a lot more than roast beef, so check out their website, mavericksbeef.com, or check out their restaurant on Lexington in Roseville. It's that time of year again where the weather is getting nice and it's time to get out of the house for some family fun. Lilliput is the perfect place and is open for the season. Be the first to take on their newest escape room, The Bunker. It's intense, exciting, and totally unforgettable. Prefer spooky? Try the Haunted Mansion. When you're done escaping, hit the mini golf course, go-karts, and jump pads. Lilliput is perfect for parties and group events too. Visit lilliput.net for hours and start your spring adventures at Lilliput. And if you're watching me tonight on GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun on Facebook, I ask that you consider setting me some stars tonight, as stars is a great way to help Facebook with the algorithm of getting the show out to more people to see. I'd really appreciate that if you would consider doing so. We are seeing already more people getting engaged and involved, and that's really what this is about. Is we're trying to create a community around the show so we can keep talking about paranormal experiences, and every little bit helps. Another way to help us is if you would consider signing up for my Patreon. Go to patreon.com/GhostBox Radio, and it starts as low as $3 a month, and that gives you access to episodes of GhostBox Radio from the last 10 years, including a lot of the earlier stuff that is not on AM 950. Also, it seems like that Spotify or whatever gets rid of episodes. They stop running or having them available for like the past 3 months, at least for however we have them set up now. So those are also on Patreon as well. Welcome back. We are having a great conversation with Simon Bown. And Simon, first of all, I got your name wrong, so I apologize for that. It's one of those weird things, right, that you see a name and it's Bown, and the brain just kind of is like, oh, that's Brown, not Bown. And so I introduced you incorrectly, and I thank you for just letting me know. That was it's one of my biggest pet peeves to get a name wrong. So I appreciate very much that we got that right finally. So one thing we got right tonight, right, Simon?
Yeah, no problem.
So we are talking tonight about your book, Verified Near-Death Experiences, and is this available now? Like in the U.S., can we get this like from Amazon?
Yeah, it's on Amazon, and it'll be Barnes and Noble, other places like that. I don't think it'll be on the shelf in the shop, but you can order it from their website.
I think people should, and I will put it up on GhostBox Radio, GhostBox Book Club, with a affiliated Amazon link. If folks would be kind enough to get it through that, or consider getting it through that, once again, helps me out. I'd greatly appreciate it. Talking about near-death experiences now, and one of the things that I was curious about is that when I've heard stories of when people. I'm going to back up here a second. When we call it near-death experiences, do we actually can we say that person had died and come back, or because they came back they did not die? Is there like a proper terminology to that, or proper way of talking about it?
Well, I'd say it's up to us.
Sure.
I had somebody say that to me. Well, it's not a death experience because they didn't die. But how do you define what death is?
Yeah.
But there are people in my book who their heart has stopped, their brain is flatlined, and that is, how doctors would define death. But then they're resuscitated. So it depends, I suppose, whether you say death, it means it's permanent, or death is something you can come back from.
That sounds like a whole other conversation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, because that's, to me, it's like if you're clinically dead and then you're brought back, I personally consider that you've died. And I wasn't sure what the right way of talking about it is, but okay, that helps me. Someone who has died or had these near-death experiences come back with perhaps some psychic abilities or some kind of gifts that they didn't have before. Have you run into that with the people you spoke with?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Like some of them may have had some kind of psychic talent or some kind of mediumship before the NDE, and afterwards it's like it's supercharged and it's so much more powerful. There's one of the guys in my book, after he woke up from his near-death experience, he was lying in bed and his family were around him, and his dead aunt was there in the background, and she gave him a message to pass on to his was it his aunt, his great aunt? Anyway, a message to pass on to another woman that was there that was absolutely correct. And it was her aunt was saying to this woman, stop crying your eyes out every night, because this woman had died just a few months before, and
Mm.
the woman in the hospital was saying, it's true, I've been so upset, I've been in tears every night since that happened, and she hasn't told anybody about it. And
Wow.
later on, he was talking to a psychiatrist about his near-death experience because he thought it was all a hallucination or something. And then the psychiatrist's grandmother shows up in the session, and he starts telling the psychiatrist all this stuff the grandmother's saying, and the psychiatrist throws him out. And he called him like a couple of hours later and said, look, I'm sorry about that. I don't know where you got that information. I don't think what you experienced was a hallucination, and
Wow.
you need to investigate it yourself.
That's a whole other aspect of it too, is not only the people who've had these near-death experiences, but the people who are affected by it around them. They're either the people like the psychiatrist or whatever. The dealing with seemingly impossible, right? And the dealing with how the human brain tries to grapple with this sort of new idea of somebody who they probably have known and loved for a great deal of time suddenly has had this incredible experience that defies rational explanation, and they're having to deal with it and trying to process that. I think that's an interesting part of it too.
Yeah, well, there's a statistic that 70% of people who have a near-death experience end up getting divorced.
Oh, wow.
Because it changes them so much. It's just like you could imagine somebody who's got a great career and lots of money and a big house and a great car, and they have a near-death experience and come back from it, and they're suddenly, I don't want that stuff. And they're much more spiritual and worrying about the environment and the animals, and they want to give up their job and do something else. But if they got a partner, they're like, no, hang on a second, I like the house, I like the money, I don't want you to give that stuff up.
That's and I was going to say, and I think I know the answer to this as we're talking, but as like I'm wondering if people who have had these experiences that might come back with some gifts or whatnot that didn't have before, if they've kept some of those quiet because they don't want people to judge or anything. But I guess saying it out loud, I guess more than likely not, because if you're even talking about the near-death experience, that's a giant leap right there and like you said, you are probably coming back as a very changed person.
Yeah. And there's other things that show up, other after effects, where people can't wear watches because they just keep stopping, or electrical devices malfunction around them.
Wow.
Or they have these incredible synchronicities showing up. And it's the same kind of after effects that people who claim to be abducted by aliens have. Just the same thing. And it's weird that those two experiences that are so different have the same after effects.
I was going to ask if that's ever crossed over in near-death experiences, just as, it seems to me that people in near-death experiences may not have seen any aliens or anything like that, but if there was anything that there's a commonality, and it sounds like that there is in some cases there are, at least as far as how someone brought back to Earth has to deal with the repercussions of, like you just said, the watches and whatnot. It's such an interesting thing. Do you think there's any connection between the two at all in terms of aliens at all linked with any of our afterlife?
Yeah, I think there's something where it's all connected. There's something to do with consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been religious, so I don't look at it as being something to do with what you might call God, the Christian God or something. But it seems like it's all connected. There's some people who have alien abduction and they complain to the ETs and say, you've got no right to do this, you shouldn't be taking me. And they say, but you agreed to this before you were born. And then there's a lady in my book, she was in this near-death experience, she's in this spiritual space, this incredible landscape. And she said to the left of her in the distance, there are all these people in clothes from all different eras of human history. And there were people there that were like from the future. But she also said there were some beings there that just were not human. And she realized that all of those were her past lives and her future lives. And she could sense a small part of her soul in all of them. So there she was seeing like ETs in that space. And when I've taken people through past life regressions, a small number of them have gone to past lives on other planets. So I can see connections there.
That's beautiful. I mean, I mean, it gives you something to be excited about, doesn't it? I mean, I just love that. Do you think all of like for myself, my personal timeline that I'm living right now, do you think it's that timelines are stacked like all my other timelines? So it's like I'm concurrently living all these lives at once, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, that's how I see it.
Yeah.
That's how people who have near-death experiences describe the experience of time, of saying it doesn't exist. And with reincarnation, I kind of see it like a tree where your soul is the tree trunk and all the leaves are all your different lives. So just as the tree's experiencing all the leaves at the same time, your soul's experiencing all of your lives at the same time, and that they're not one after the other. And I wonder if that's something that helps with past life regression, because we can just kind of connect through the network to this other life that's existing at the same time. And then there's other hints that there's lots of us, like there's lots of Gregs in lots of universes having all these other lives and experiences.
And I apologize to everyone in all those universes now for that, but it's in a way it's kind of a misnomer to call it past life in some regard, because it's possible that these aren't past. But I mean, I get that that's probably how we're going to be able to process it better by calling it a past life, because to us it would be past. So
Yeah, it's an easy phrase to use,
Yeah,
isn't it? And
yeah.
people understand it.
Now, what about miscomprehension about past life? Sorry, not past life. See, you got me going now on past life regret. About near that'll be another episode. We'll bring you back for that. What about
Yeah.
miscomprehensions about near-death experiences?
But one of them I think is with the tunnel of light and saying go into the
Sure.
light. When the tunnel experience, there's only 15 to 20% of people who have a near-death experience have any kind of tunnel experience. Most of them say that they move in an instant. One woman described it as the blink environment, because you blink and then you're there.
hmm
But also there's this idea that it's a tunnel and there's a light at the end. And there was kind of a scientist trying to explain that by saying this was due to low blood oxygen, and when that happens your peripheral vision shuts down, so that you're just seeing darkness around you, and eventually you just see the light right in front of you. But one of the researchers, Dr. Bruce Grayson, who's been researching near-death experiences for decades, he's at the University of Virginia. He said that he's talked to people who've had near-death experiences and they had that peripheral vision, tunnel vision in the hospital, and then they went on to have a tunnel experience. But the tunnels are so different as well. And also the people say they use the word tunnel, but that's not the best word, but it's the only one they can come up with in the English language. And I've heard the tunnel described as being absolutely enormous and full of light and other people going up the tunnel. And somebody else said they saw people coming down the tunnel.
Oh,
And
wow.
somebody else described it to me as being just big enough for them to go through it. And then there was a guy, he's in my book. For him, the tunnel was like being in an aircraft with all the seats removed. And the aircraft, this fuselage just went off into the distance. And all this light was coming through the windows. And then there's a girl in the book that's, for her, the tunnel was made of transparent bricks and all this light was coming in. So this whole experience, there's no way you could explain it with just your peripheral vision shutting down.
Right.
So that I think there's a common, it might be in society that people think with a near-death experience, oh, there's always the tunnel of light experience, but there isn't. And it can be very varied.
I think that I like the idea that if you have a near death experience, it suddenly it might take you to a place that's almost like a transportation center or something where you are seeing other people. Like it doesn't feel so siloed. It feels like that there are a lot of people, a lot of spirits, a lot of entities or whatever are experiencing this, and it's actually it's actually not just an experience, but you're actually going to perhaps another form of civilization or something. I find that to be I find that to be very appetizing, quite honestly.
Yeah, the thing about the near-death experiences is they seem to be tailored perfectly to the individual.
Yeah.
And wonder if there's some spiritual beings or spirit guides who they know you so well, they build it perfectly for you.
Mm,
And could be sometimes like a spiritual kick up the pants to get you
right.
back on your proper life path. And so there are those near-death experiences where it's just one person alone and maybe with a spirit guide, but others where people meet all sorts of deceased loved ones and other spirits, and all sorts of locations show up that can be very spiritual or very earth-like. And so the more you get into it, the more complicated all that stuff is. And there's always such a tremendous connection with everything around you and all the souls that are there. Yes, it just goes on and on. It gets so complicated.
I love it. I absolutely love it. What we're gonna do? Let's take our next break here. When we come back, Simon's going to talk about a case from the book. We're going to talk about that with some other questions. I love this conversation. I'm really enjoying it. I hope you are too. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Greg Bakun here. I love historic tours of Minneapolis and seeing everything it has to offer. But, if you know me, I like to include a little spooky in my tours, which is why I found the perfect combination. Minneapolis Trolley Tours does this amazing candlelight ghost tour that you have to check out. It's an extremely immersive experience. It's a trolley trip that starts out at a haunted mansion, traveling around Minneapolis locations exposing ghost stories that the public and business owners would rather left untold. Then a tour of the aforementioned haunted mansion where ghosts of past residents from the 1800s reside, plus a lot of surprises to discover. Next, experience Gertrude's After Hours. Did I mention Gertrude is the mansion's most famous ghost? Maybe she'll show up. And you finish up the tour at Gertrude's Lounge in the haunted basement of the mansion with refreshments and Q&A. The trolleys are climate controlled and the mansion is restored to perfection. Check out MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for more information. Have you ever met someone who not only can help you on a deep spiritual level, but also potentially change your life? Refined Divine is an extremely gifted psychic medium who travels the nation and lives right here in the Midwest. And she offers mediumship, mentorship, house and business parties, energy healing, palm readings, and so much more. Refined Divine has helped thousands, and she can help you.
Hi, this is Psychic Medium Deb. I cannot wait to hear from you. You can go to refineddivinepsychic.com.
Greg Bakun here. Like you, I love good, fresh, delicious food. So I want to tell you about this treasure in Roseville called Maverick's Real Roast Beef. Maverick's has the best roast beef sandwiches I've ever had. Made fresh every order. Add fries or onion rings dropped in the fryer when ordered, and you have a winning combination. Maverick's Real Roast Beef has a lot more than roast beef, so check out their website, mavericksbeef.com, or check out their restaurant on Lexington in Roseville. It's that time of year again where the weather is getting nice and it's time to get out of the house for some family fun. Lilliput is the perfect place and is open for the season. Be the first to take on their newest escape room, The Bunker. It's intense, exciting, and totally unforgettable. Prefer spooky? Try the Haunted Mansion. When you're done escaping, hit the mini golf course, go-karts, and jump pads. Lilliput is perfect for parties and group events too. Visit lilliput.net for hours and start your spring adventures at Lilliput. And join me tomorrow on GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun. I am going to have on a local author, and actually not so much when I talk to him tomorrow, but at the time at least, local to me, like just down the road from me, having author Daniel Myers, and we're going to talk about his book series, The Knight's Trials, and it's a great fantasy series. But also, what's really exciting about it is I love talking with him about the fact of an author who just decided I need to write this, and just started, and he got himself behind it, and he got his family behind it. I want to talk about that. That's going to be tomorrow. We are talking in this final segment with Simon Bown, and we are talking about his book, Verified Near-Death Experiences. I would recommend picking this up. I mean, we're just talking about a few things on here, but boy, this is really cool. What got you interested in particular with near-death experiences?
Well, I read a book in the 1980s called Life After Life by Dr. Raymond Moody. And that was really the first book about near-death experiences. It was published 1976.
Mhm.
And he's the guy that coined that phrase, near-death experience.
Wow.
And that got me into it. And I remember reading it thinking, wow, is this real? Because I was reading a lot of books, maybe about ghosts and Bigfoot and UFOs and all sorts of things. So this afterlife stuff was right what I was interested in. And I was even going to the College of Psychic Studies in London,
Mhm.
which was set up by the Society for Psychical Research, maybe 140 years ago now. And so I was investigating all this stuff back then in the 80s. And I've been into it for years and years, and just read more and more books as time has passed.
And it culminated. I mean, it obviously is a big part of what culminated into what you do now with the 2 podcasts, writing the books, hypnotherapy, all this stuff. I mean, it just it truly all folds into each other, actually, which is I don't know if a lot of people totally understand that.
Yeah, it does. And it's like I did a past life regression with somebody recently, and it spontaneously went to an alien abduction event that he regressed to, something that happened in this life. And we weren't trying to find that. It just happened.
So once again, the book is called Near-Death Experiences, or Verified Near-Death Experiences. Is there a story in particular of anyone that you want to talk about at all?
Yeah, one of my favorite cases is a guy called Tibor Putnoki, who's a Hungarian man. And in the early 90s, he went into hospital with very high blood pressure, and the doctors were very worried about him. And at one point, he just found himself standing in this ward in the hospital, and he was thinking, "Oh man, I feel great. This is good. I don't feel bad at all." But these nurses were rushing past him, and a doctor, and he turned around, and they're working on some body in a bed, and he couldn't see who it was, so he didn't realize it was him. It was his body that they were rushing to. And on the side of the ward, there was a room where nurses would prepare things, and it had a two-way mirror. So nurses could see into the ward, but you couldn't see in that room.
Mm.
And he thought about what's going on in there. And then in an instant, he was in that room. And there was a
Wow.
nurse standing in front of a cabinet with a trolley, taking all these things out of the cabinet really quickly and putting them on the trolley. She dropped something that rolled underneath the cabinet. And he wondered, what was that? And for some reason, instantly, his eyesight was just a few inches from this item underneath the cabinet. So he could read the label, and he read the serial number. And then he realized there was another nurse in there on the phone, and he was suddenly next to her, and he could hear what she was saying, and he could hear the husband as well. It's this kind of weird stuff that comes up in near-death experiences. You can hear people's thoughts, and they were having this conversation about a phone number of the doctor. Their children were ill, and he was at home, and he had the phone book, and she was telling him where the phone number was, and he couldn't find it, and they're getting frustrated. And then in an instant, Tibor was with the husband in that apartment. So he saw the apartment, the books on the shelves, the furniture, what the carpet was like, and he saw this phone book, and he noticed the guy's socks. And he said, these socks have little pictures on them of animals. What kind of a man wears socks like this? So he went on and had all sorts of other kind of spiritual experiences with the life review and things. But eventually he was resuscitated. And when he was stabilized, the doctor came to him and said, "So you were dead for 9 minutes. Did anything happen?" So he told him about the cabinet, and the doctor went and retrieved the item. It was exactly where Tybor said it would be. There's no way he could have seen
No.
that from his hospital bed with the two-way mirror, but he was accurate on what it said on the package, and he got the serial number right. And then they found the nurse that was on the phone, and the doctor said, "Do you know this man? Has he ever been to your apartment?" And she was like, "No, I don't know him." So she confirmed that she'd had that phone call and what the content of the phone call was. And she went with the doctor to their apartment, and there it was, exactly as Tybor described it. And when the doctor returned to the hospital, he had those socks in his hand with the little animal pictures on them. So there's several verification events there. And one of the things about this is there's a skeptical point of view that, if it happens in the operating theatre, that's where your body is. And maybe you did have some form of consciousness and you hallucinated and you heard things. And so you kind of put it together what happened there. But you can't explain how he would know what's happening in this room next to the ward, or especially not what's happening in an apartment that's 7 kilometers from the hospital. So that's one of my favorite cases in the book.
It's amazing. It is absolutely amazing, and I could see why that's a favorite. And you can't explain that away with just saying that it didn't happen or anything. I'm actually kind of speechless over that. That's phenomenal, actually. One of the things that we really glossed over, which I want to kind of just get back to a little bit, is that when you had talked in the last segment about having doing the past life regression, I think it was, with the woman being abducted by alien, and she's like, "Why are you doing this to me?" And he's like, "You've agreed to this before." We don't talk enough about those contracts that we hear that we possibly all sign before we come back into existence, and it lays out our path, our life. And presumably there's probably a good possibility that these moments where people get in these accidents and they have to be operated on, and they have these near-death experiences, seems like that's probably going to be in there as well. Does contracts come up anymore in your findings in this area?
Yeah, that's something I ask people who have near-death experiences. I say, do you think this was part of the plan, that you put this into your life before you were born? And some of them say absolutely yes. Others say they're not sure about it. There's one thing about life plans is that they're not set in stone,
Mm-hmm.
and that you can go off them. You still have free will. And I kind of find it funny calling it contracts, because you imagine, okay, you have to call the lawyers in and start getting the paperwork together. But,
you don't think they're spiritual you don't think they're spiritual lawyers? I mean, you're like, no.
I've never really thought about it. It just seems like a comedy image.
Yeah, no, it is. I call it contract because a lot of the mediums that I work with around here, they call those life contracts, and I think kind of like past life regression, like the term, or sorry, yeah, past life regression, the term itself maybe is kind of, it's easy for us to maybe understand what some of that is by calling it like, this is something that is kind of written out beforehand. But I totally agree. I don't think that everything is necessarily going to be set in stone either.
Yeah, I get the impression that there's a group of souls that work together, a soul family or soul group, and before you're born, you all sit down. It's almost like putting on a play, and you've all got the script, and you decide which role you're going to play in that person's life. And perhaps you might say, well, okay, I'm going to marry you, but if we don't meet by the time we're 30, then I'm going to marry someone else. And somebody else might say, well, I need someone in my life who's going to be an awful father. And that's somebody, okay, yeah, I'll be an awful father. I'll do that for you in your life. And that's where they have these contracts that they agree how they're going to have different roles in lives. And then in past life regression, people recognize people. It's like they say, hang on, that person who was my father in a past life is now my brother in this life. And they recognize those connections.
I always thought that the greatest program that is about reincarnation that is actually not about reincarnation is the Blackadder comedy series, the 4 series of
Yeah.
Blackadder, because every series it's the same characters, same actors, same characters, but the hierarchy of who they are, the time period, their interactions with each other pretty much change for the most part during each one. And I thought, God, that's a great sort of allegory for reincarnation, because I've always thought kind of what you just said too, like you have these people and they're always going to be, I always think they're going to be around you throughout your travel, your journey, but we're all doing different things. We're playing different roles. Maybe, my mom in my next life is going to be my child or my best friend or something like that. That's the way I've always seen it personally.
Yeah, and it also may be that you could be a terrible father in this life, and then the next one you're the child and they're the terrible father.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's payback, like you say, karma, and it's some kind of retribution. It's about balance and learning both sides of the experience.
Yeah, no, very interesting. One last thing I wanted to kind of say about what I always kind of thought was interesting about near-death experiences, and I've always kind of equated to this, and I've often wondered if some people who claim they've had a near-death experience, which they're not going to be in this book of yours, but I've often wondered, some people who claim they've had it and maybe it wasn't verifiable, is that whole thing of like you set your alarm for 6:30 in the morning, you wake up and it's like 6:28 in the morning, and you're like, I still have a couple minutes. Then you fall back asleep, and it feels like that you've had, an hours of dreams of something, and then it goes off, because once again, time doesn't seem to calculate and doesn't seem to be, it gets away from you. And I've wondered if some people, their brains are doing something like that when they may have not fully died or whatever else, but it might be a sort of an explanation for what some people experience. Once again, not exactly what you have in your book, but sort of maybe they didn't quite get a near-death experience. Does that make sense at all?
I don't relate it to near-death experiences.
But some people may call having a near-death experience as that what they might have experienced is something more along the lines of what I just talked about. Is like it might have just been more they drifted off, and time seems to have been a lot longer than it really was, but they didn't have the same sort of experiences of the people in your book.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Is it that there's people who don't really know much about near-death experiences, and they have something weird happen like that and think, oh, that must have been what it is?
Exactly, and that it might have just been their brain still, functioning. And I mean, obviously, the main thing about a near-death experience is going to be that people who are working on them could verify that certain things have stopped, right? That's kind of the starting point for a near-death experience. They died. And then that's
mostly.
the things. Yeah.
3 of the people in my book had their experience while they were in a coma, so their body didn't die.
Oh, interesting.
But it's that thing that helps with the verification if they were hooked up to devices that can show their heart had stopped and their brain had flatlined.
Absolutely, and that's I love that. I love this conversation, and I think I'd love to do more. I'd love to talk with you about aliens at some point as well. If you'd like to come back at some point, I would absolutely love it.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Simon Bown, the book is Verified Near-Death Experiences. You can get it through Amazon. Check out Barnes & Noble. Also, don't forget to go to a local bookstore and see if you can order it. That way, you can also support the local bookstores. Also, it'll be on my website. Everyone, Simon, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. We're going to be back tomorrow with Dan Myers, and we're going to be talking about his book series as well. Everyone, have a fantastic night.